It's time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France with our very own Florence Villeminot. Hi, Flo. Today we're going to focus on the legacy of former French President Jacques Chirac, who passed away aged 86. He was an affable rogue, you might say. He had one of the longest political careers, not just in France, but in Europe, and was one of this country's favorite politicians.
Which might seem paradoxical because his time as president was marked by a lot of stagnation, some would say inaction. In fact, some go as far as to say that he didn't really achieve that much as president, and yet people loved him here in France. He was affectionately called Chichi, and he came to represent kind of an old school, debonair, quintessentially French man, a kind of grandfather figure. So many people in France were really sad when they found out that he had died.
When I found out, it brought tears to my eyes. It broke my heart. I'm Parisian. He was a wonderful mayor of Paris, and France had an incredible aura around the world.
I came to pay tribute to him. He was a great man. He was president when I was born. I grew up during his presidency. He was a politician, but also a man of the people. We liked him as a person.
He was close to the people, and he was a bon vivant. He clearly loved life.
And it's true, this image of Chirac as a bon vivant, a man who loved life to the fullest, is really the one that most people seem to be remembering.
That's right. And it's our expression du jour, an expression we use in English as well. Bon vivant, one who lives life to the fullest, a fun-loving person. And for many people, this really sums up Jacques Chirac. He certainly mastered the art of political seduction. For decades, he charmed the socks off French people, carefully cultivating this image of a very charismatic man of the people, this despite his bourgeois background. Now, what's certain, though, is that Chirac really loved France and all its products and traditions, and he had a massive appetite for all the good things in France. He loved to eat many, many delicacies in France, often washing it down with beers or wine. He was also an unabashed ladies' man and not totally unapologetic about it. He was a very chatty person, and this made him often the target of mockery, comedians, etc., but this made him even more likable.
One place Jacques Chirac loved to rub shoulders with the crowd was at the annual agriculture fair here in Paris, Le Salon de l'Agriculture.
And farmers really worshiped the ground that Chirac walked on because once upon a time he was agricultural minister and really fought for their rights in the face of the European Common Agricultural Policy. And so he would spend hours at the Salon de l'Agriculture, patting all sorts of farm animals and, of course, tasting all the delicious things that you can eat at the Salon de l'Agriculture. He would really spend hours in the crowd and soaking up all the love. Take a look.
Excellent. Boire du rosé, ça le fait très bien passer.
Despite that friendly man of the people image, Jacques Chirac was also a political animal. He did manage to be at the forefront of French politics for decades.
Which is incredible. Now, say what you like about Chirac, he was a clever politician, and he managed to climb all the echelons of power in France and hold on to power. He was mayor of Paris for 18 years, various ministers, prime minister, and then president for 2 terms. Now, politically, he was known as somewhat of a weather vane. He would often change his opinion and shift his opinion, to suit him on Europe, on the climate, on the economy. Now, at home, one of his greatest gestures was to acknowledge France's role in the deportation of Jews during the Second World War, which was what's known as the Rafle du Veldiv. And internationally, of course, he'll be remembered for leading France's very strong opposition against the U.S.-led invasion in Iraq in 2003. Now, leaders from around the world joined people here in France to pay their respects to Jacques Chirac during a national day of mourning, and among them was the former U.S. President Bill Clinton.
What a good representative for France he was, because he was always upbeat, always positive, always very French, very protective of French interests, but in a way that brought people together, not drove them apart. So I'll miss Chirac. I liked him and I'll miss him.
On top of his political legacy, Jacques Chirac also wanted to leave behind a cultural legacy, a project that he would always be remembered by.
That's right, and he got that in the Quai Branly Museum, which actually bears his name, the Quai Branly Museum Jacques Chirac. It's where he left his biggest mark on French culture. There are 1.2 million visitors a year at this museum, which is on the banks of the River Seine. It was designed by the French architect Jean Nouvel, and it was founded by Jacques Chirac in 2006 to celebrate non-European art. And so inside you'll find textiles, sculptures, paintings, musical instruments from Africa, Asia, Oceania, the Americas. And he launched this in 2006, which is the same year that France 24 launched. And France 24 was actually a project of Jacques Chirac. So with this museum, he brought the world to France. And I guess with France 24, he brought France to the world.
Indeed. Well, Chirac's legacy, of course, has some darker areas. Tell us about that.
That's right. Well, in 2011, there was actually quite a historic trial here in France, and Jacques Chirac became the first former president to be convicted of corruption. This following an embezzlement charges that in a party funding scandal. This was during the time that he was mayor of Paris, so between 1977 and 1995. But what's interesting is this trial didn't at all tarnish his image. In fact, according to a poll, French people consider him their best president in the modern era, alongside Charles de Gaulle, and perhaps also the coolest president. Lots of people say that he became kind of a pop icon here in France. You can see this article in Cosmopolitan. It's not uncommon to see French kids wearing T-shirts with kind of vintage photos of Jacques Chirac, because love him or hate him, his death really marked the end of an era. It's a page of French history that certainly has been turned.
It certainly has. Flo, thank you for that. Florence Villeminot with that French Connections. Don't forget, if you have your own questions about France or the French, you can always send Flo a tweet at Flo Villeminot.